For more on the devastating flood in Libya, a geographer and environmentalist, Chukwudi Njoku, joins me on the World Now. Good to have you join us.
It's a pleasure to join you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Let's look at this, first of all, holistically as to what's happening in North Africa before we talk more specifically about Libya. Two of Africa's countries, Morocco and Libya, have been battered by natural disasters, earthquake in Morocco and floods in Libya. What's your assessment of this particular situation?
Yeah, the situation in North Africa currently is quite worrisome, and both the earthquake and the flooding, happening at the same time, would definitely put so much pressure on the Middle East, the MENA region, that's the Middle East and North African region, in terms of responding to these disasters which are occurring around at about the same time. Though there may not be a relationship between the earthquake and the flooding, but then the coincidence of their occurrence, cause for worry and cause for concern. Good to see that there are concerted efforts anyway to manage the situation, because we're seeing help coming from different angles in managing the situation simultaneously at both countries.
And does this speak to where Africa could find itself as climate scientists continue to warn about the magnitude of the kind of natural disasters that we might experience in this decade?
Yes, of course. It's the whole occurrence points to the fact that Africa as a continent must sit up in terms of early warning, and especially improving infrastructure that supports quick response to this kind of disasters that we're seeing happening. This is so because Africa is most impacted by the impacts of climate change. African countries are most vulnerable. African countries have the least measures put in place for disaster management. And going by what we see and the fact that Africa is most impacted by the climate change, then it goes to show that the African countries must sit up. Good to see anyway that the Africa Climate Summit just ended. That is a step in the right direction because we now see that African leaders are sitting together and working towards having one voice towards their efforts to reduce the impacts of climate change.
And interesting that you mentioned early warning, because the World Meteorological Organization is saying that, look, if there were early warnings concerning this particular disaster in Libya, that the deaths could have been avoided. How important is this, and what sort of early warning actions could have been taken?
Yes, I stumbled on a report by the same World Meteorological Agency, I think, that said that the early warning signs were actually there, and that warnings were given with regards to the flooding in Libya 72 hours before the flooding occurred. It is not sure, however, what kind of response the government of Libya took to manage that situation and prevent the disaster that we're seeing. Early warning is very important when it comes to natural disasters, especially incidents like flooding. But what is even more important is not just the warning, but then the response, because I have also seen reports that the dams that collapsed in Dena they already had cracks and they were faulty, and even the residents had complained before now that there was a need for the government to do something about those dams. And that is the response aspect, which is very, very important, and even much more important than the early warning aspect.
And in terms of search and rescue response, both in Morocco and in Libya, what sort of factors could complicate rescue efforts?
Yes, Libya's case is unique because of the political fractures that the country is currently undergoing. Since the war and the division of the country into two political lines, as well as the parallel government, which we have in the Dena region, different from the central government by the national unity, the government of the national unity. Sorry, that complicates the issue in Libya because that may have also influenced the poor response that we saw in the case of this particular flooding. So Libya's case is kind of unique. It is very likely that the political fractures may have also influenced the scale of disaster that we're seeing in terms of the poor response. But then for Morocco, the earthquake was quite disastrous, a 6.2 magnitude earthquake, and this destroyed most of the access roads to the communities that were around the epicenter of the earthquake. And this prevented aid and relief materials to get to these areas, especially around the epicenter. This delay increased the number of fatalities, definitely, because it also hindered rescue efforts that would have gotten to these places. But of course, the earthquake destroyed most of the access roads to these places, and that also escalated the situation.
Mm. And I just want to ask you, because we know that we've gotten a lot of report from environmentalists as yourself and climate scientists. But my question really is, does it get better from here or does it get worse? And that's in terms of the climate change disasters we're going to witness.
I don't want to be a prophet of doom, but it's seeming like it's going to get worse because the impact, we keep seeing events that have not happened in centuries happening, like the flood in Libya. North Africa has not witnessed that amount of rainfall falling in a very short period of time. In fact, Libya has an average rainfall of 100 millimeters in a year. And then just in 2 days, Storm Daniel brought in more than 400 millimeters of rainfall. So this is unprecedented. And we're seeing this kind of occurrences happening over and over again, not just in Africa, but in other parts of the world. But then I'm thinking it's seeming as if things may not get better unless, of course, governments, organizations, and institutions take drastic measures in the coming days.
Geographer and environmentalist Chukwudi Njoku, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you very much.